Today on The Bigger Picture, I have the pleasure of speaking with Uriel Reichman, the founder of the first private university, Reichman University, here in Israel. Uriel, welcome to the show.
Pleased to be with you.
I think that it's fair to say that we find ourselves today in a war on democracy, and all while under the guise of an innocent and benign judicial reform. Firstly, I think that in this modern world, we take democracy for granted. We perceive it as a fact of life, and we often forget that the democracies that we find ourselves in have been built. And if they're not maintained and upheld, they can also crumble. So let me ask you the first most important question. What is democracy?
Well, first, let me say that I'm very pleased to have this talk with you. Well, democracy is not just the rule of the majority. Democracy is actually, translated from Greek, it's a voice of the people. But democracy, liberal democracy, what we learn to recognize as a democracy in the modern era, is a democracy that is built on two very basic elements, many other ingredients, but two basic elements. First, that there is via representation, the majority decides and controls the legislation. The parliament is controlling the legislation. And but there is, in every democracy, there is ways and means to control that power, because it can lead to the tyranny of the majority. So in Israel, and there are various means and ways to do it, and usually it's several elements that control the two houses of parliament, separation of powers.
Right, the checks and balances.
There is checks and balances. In Israel, we have only one major check, which is the Supreme Court of the state. In Israel, in a very strange way, due to the coalition system, government is controlling basically the parliament. Due to the coalition system, due to, by the way of coalition agreements, actually every decision by the government is immediately supported by the majority of the parliament, of the Knesset. So you have a situation that the only safeguard is not separation of powers, actually, but only the Supreme Court of the state. So, and that issue is challenged in a horrible way today.
Absolutely. I think that, we often make this mistake of assuming, as, the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, that the moral arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice. And I think that while I would love to wholeheartedly believe that, on the whole, we are becoming more humane and we're progressing morally, I think it's also very important to understand that there is this ever-present danger of regressing towards less humane and more archaic ways of being and organizing ourselves as a society. So what do you think are the biggest mistakes that people are making today when they're interpreting the situation that we find ourselves in? And what are the glaring blind spots that you see in the public discourse?
Well, we have a situation, a very strange situation, that the present coalition, for various reasons and interests that we may explore later on, decided to do away with the democratic systems that we had from the very inception of the State of Israel under our Declaration of Independence. By adopting this this attitude that democracy is just the rule of the majority, and there are no safeguards beyond the decisions and the laws of the parliament, we came into a very bizarre situation that we didn't expect in the country. One has to understand what really happened. On the campaign didn't really expose the intentions of doing away with democracy. They just said that there must be some judicial reforms. And what they did actually was to put forward several rules that actually eliminated the Supreme Court. First, they said that there is the rule of there will be a rule of the majority that can overrun by just 50% of the parliament members plus one vote every decision of the court. So if the court thinks that a certain piece of legislation is in violation of the basic principle of a democratic society, and is like in the United States and other Western countries, and is declaring that the law is unconstitutional, the parliament can overrun it. Say, okay, it doesn't fit us. It's no good. It's cancelled. The decision has no effect. And there are other elements that they put forward. They demanded certain majority by any decision of the court, which is a constitutional decision, that the court will have to reach a decision only with the 15 members of the Supreme Court and 13 voting against it. So two or three can hold up the decision against Parliament, which in any case the Parliament can overrun. And there are many other elements that they put in special laws that actually altogether totally intended to suffocate the Supreme Court of Israel. So by not doing it, they didn't cancel, of course, the court, but what they did was simply take away the entire power of the Supreme Court to review, having a judicial review of the decision of Parliament. And alongside, also, if you're trying to do away with administrative decisions, even in that element, they were moving into limiting very much the power of the court. So what we ended up with was put immediately after the election on the table, a full system that its absolutely intention was to have the total ability by Parliament to make whatever decisions and laws they intend. As a result of it, we were deprived of the very, very basic tenets of basic citizens' right. We became at once, if they succeed, subjects instead of citizens. Each democracy maintains a system of protection of basic human and citizens' rights that gives you, protects certain very basic freedoms and rights, and a situation of equality before the law that cannot be denied by a simple majority, by majority at all, and by Parliament. And that is exactly what they wanted to do. And as a result, they came up immediately after they presented what they wanted to do, which wasn't presented before the election. They presented it in outcry by the people, which they didn't believe probably that it will come out, at least not in such power. And what you ended up with is millions of Israelis sending with the flags and demanding the government to renege on that kind of legislation. It's very interesting to see it. The demonstrators didn't say that the government is illegal, but they said what they are about to do with the scheme, the total scheme, is unconstitutional, in violation of the basic principles on which the State of Israel was founded, according to the our Declaration of Independence. They didn't want any, kind of reduction in income tax or any special rights and so on and so forth. Just you saw millions of Israelis standing 34 weeks now, standing with the flag, waving the flags, people from all parts of society, and asking one thing: stop this kind of anti-democratic revolution.
So these protests have been going on for a while now. And I think that one of the positives that have come out of these protests is that it has united people who weren't united beforehand. And yet we do find ourselves with extreme polarization in Israel. And I think it's a phenomenon that we're seeing the world over, partly due to the digital age that we live in and the fact that we all exist in these secluded information silos. We're fed by a screen, by a personalized algorithm that caters to our confirmation bias and alienates us from one another even more. What kind of polarization have you been seeing here in Israel? What are the sources of it? And do you see any way of bridging the gap?
It's a unique situation that was developed due to a combination or a unity of anti-democratic sentiments among part of the population, a part that most of them voted for this government that is established now in Israel. You have to understand that there is, over the years, there is a growing rift between various parts of the Israeli society. There are the ultra-Orthodox. There are especially the Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox, that they inherited the opposition in the European ultra-Orthodox Jews in Europe against the Zionist movement. They saw the Zionist movement, which was mainly run by secular Jews, as illegal, so to speak. It's like being heretic, and they were totally against it. And indeed, I don't know what would have happened to the Jewish people if Zionism wasn't established and run very effectively from let's say, the last quarter of the 19th century. I don't know if we would have survived at all after the Holocaust if Zionism wasn't in existence and the state of Israel wasn't not intended to be born. But they came to Israel, remnants, people that continued the tradition of the anti-Zionist approach from Europe. And whereas the Zionist movement thought that this is a salvation of Geula, of let's say, the third chapter in Jewish history, and a jubilation of building again our national homeland. They felt differently, and they tried to continue the diaspora ghetto existence of Europe in Israel. And they actually felt that they are not recognizing this Jewish state being, so to speak, heretic. And what they wanted to do was to establishing, as I said, an autonomy, a ghetto autonomy within the state of Israel. And they grew in numbers, and all the time they refused to take part in the great story of building this country, of standing up in the War of Independence, contributing to the other wars that we had, taking an active role in the economy of the country, but still demanding that the governments and the coalitions would continue to support them in their inclusive attitude. And that created a tremendous split all over the years. Many, you cannot generalize about all the ultra-Orthodox Haredim, so to call, as they are called. There are different groups and so on, and there are some differences between the Sephardi Haredim, which are much more forthcoming and taking to a large extent part in the story of this country. Many of their followers are serving in the army and working and so on, and they mainly the large part of the Ashkenazi Haredim. And this symbiosis created a tremendous split. On the one hand, the Haredim saw us, the majority, the liberal majority, as Goyim, non-Jews, not really Jews, and according to ancient Jewish traditions, you have to punish them. You don't have to allow them within the members. And they were extreme in the past, in the Golan, and you can understand it. People that step out of the community, but still was living there, extreme measures were taken against them. And on the other side, the liberal society saw them as actually not part of the country. They resented very much, their demands for supports and so on. And in some cases, they saw them as not even a religion, but as a kind of strange phenomena, like a sect that is emphasizing ancient law that should have been totally reformed hundreds of years ago. So this split actually exploded. It exploded by the very fact that the ultra-Orthodox decided to support an anti-democratic regime, a new regime that didn't take into the basic our basic attitudes that are calling for judicial supervision of the rule of the Knesset. And what was the result? That this very strange existence, that we support them economically, and they are not taking part in what's happening in the state and so on, exploded at once. We said, hey, it's not only that we are support to contribute and finance them and help them. In the Jewish tradition, we say, chotvei etzim v'shoavei mayim, being the servers, people who serve them, but now they want also to kill our basic principles, our most important elements that puts us together, which is a democracy. So at once, everything came up, and the grievances of the liberals, liberal people fighting for the country and so on, against them actually came out, and they said, well, we are not going to continue with it. That is one group, but if you want, we can discuss the other groups that formed this awful situation, awkward situation, that they wanted to declare the end of democracy in Israel.
Who are these other groups?
Well, there is a group of Messianic religions, people that built a theory an Orthodox theory that stems basically from the settlers in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. They are disciples of the Cook. There was the Rabbi Cook, was the rabbi of the major Rav Rashi in Israel before Israel was born, in the beginning of the 20th century. And he had another theory, whereas the ultra-Orthodox of the past were totally against the idea of being, they didn't think that we are doing the right thing. The liberals are not, the settlers are not part of them, and they violate the religious norms. The Rav Kook said, well, it's a beginning of resettling the country, and thereby by the settlers, by the pioneers, chalutzim, they are serving a religious purpose of resettlement of state of Israel. But at the end, they serve only the physical needs, the chomra, the economic and power foundations for the rebirth of the Shivat Zion from the religious point of view. So after everything will be settled and so on, the leadership will come and basically will take over the rule of the country, and the country should become total religious. It started with Rabbi Kook, the father. It continued very much after the Six-Day War by his son, and it was developed into a very extreme point of view that slowly conquered a good part of the National Religious Party people of the past that were the past of the Zionist movement and supporters of democracy. And what their approach was the following. First, that what we want to bring together is the three major items of Judaism, which means Torah Israel, the religious law, the land of Israel, which included, of course, every centimeter from Judea and Samaria and so on, and Am Israel or Medinat Israel, the state of Israel, which they regard as a holy thing. So by creating a situation that we will take control of, the Jews will take full control of Judea and Samaria and, of course, state of Israel. And there is another story, not the nicest one, what to do with the non-Jewish parts of it. And using every legitimate, so to speak, way of converting or bringing back into the Orthodox elements of Judaism, of the entire Jewish population in Israel, then we are coming closer to the glorious days that Messiah will actually come, and it will create the unity of the state of Israel, the people that will all become religious. Torah Israel they will get, and of course all of Eretz Israel. And then that is a purpose and aim. And to that purpose, they will try to use every democratic system in order to do it. That group has some very dangerous parts in it. On the extreme, people like Rabbi Dov Lior is a leader of it. That group is, at least in my view, is in clear violation of what I regard as being Jewish at all. That is a kind of fundamentalism that brings about even murderous altruism, that people are so engulfed in it and support it that they are ready to risk their lives in order to commit crimes in the name of the Lord.
And a holy rage.
Yeah, and that is a horrible situation. It's like, the extreme groups in Islam that are doing it. And this Rabbi Lior, according to what we know, was the one that gave the legitimacy, called Rodef, the legitimacy of doing away with Rabin at the time. And he was the rabbi that supported the Jewish underground that went into the Islamic college and murdered 3 students and wounded many. And he was the one, in a horrific way, shattered us all, said that this crazy doctor, the Kahana-supported medical physicians in Hebron, which went into Me'arat HaMachpelah, in a place where just before the holidays of the Muslims, went in and murdered 29 people and wounded, I don't know, about 150. He said he is, is a sacred person, and he is like a sacred person, like the Jews that perished in the Holocaust. So it is something that an ideology that would probably approve some action by the settlers against the Arabs, the Palestinians, and so on in the Gaza, believing that they have this Jewish call, the right to disobey the land of Israel, the democratic rule of Israel, insofar by decisions that, for example, would relate to reaching a compromise, for example, on the West Bank and so on and so forth, and taking the law into their hands. So that group was the one that designed the entire system, and it was published in their circles before the election. And the Likud, through the Minister of Justice, Levin, took it and presented it. But it was fully designed before. And after, and they actually used these revolutions that happened in a very revolutionary way. Immediately after the election, they moved in order to implement it. They decided in the coalition agreement by all the parties to the coalition that the first order of the day will be legislate all those rules that I've mentioned before, that will, basically take away the power of the court and the Supreme Court. And they did it right away. And at the same time, immediately, the first nomination of the new government was to nominate Mr. Ben-Gvir to become the head of the front unit, Mishmar HaGvul, and the police, which is basically the dream of every revolution. First, control the police, which is the only body that can actually use force against citizens by law. And they was given to immediately to Ben-Gvir, who is a Kahanic person, who is a disciple openly of this Rabbi Lior that I've mentioned before, this extreme rabbi. And he himself was honored this killer from Me'arat HaMachpelah that killed this Muslim people who prayed, and had the picture of him in his apartment. He is, a person that I wouldn't trust in giving them this power. And at the same time, actually, also immediately Netanyahu nominated the head of the ultra-Orthodox, this messianic group, the head of it. It's called the religious Zionist group, but it doesn't have with the history of Zionism as a movement nothing to do with. And he nominated him a person responsible for all the civil elements in Judea and Samaria, which made him in control over settlements and made him in control over the Jews and the Arabs living, the Palestinians living there. So what actually happened was immediately it was like a commando night operation to topple the regime, to do away with this democratic system by immediately coming up with it immediately after elections, moving fast forward to pass all the laws, and giving an extreme person the power over controlling the police and the border guard armed units as well. So we were faced immediately with such a thing. Wouldn't be if we wouldn't have this uprising, this stand-up of the entire people, standing the liberal part of society, understanding what's happening and saying, no, we are not going to take it. You won the elections, okay, but you have no right to change the system of government and under the guise of judicial reform, create a total revolution, a constitutional revolution, so to speak, a governmental revolution in the state of Israel. And here we are. It stopped. This fast-forward movement stopped, and we are in this situation right now, which we have a standstill between the parties. Now, beyond it is, of course, the responsibility of Prime Minister Netanyahu. His party, historically, was one of a liberal, free enterprise national party. What happened was two things in which, under his leadership over the years, he was running campaigns emphasizing hatred. And mainly hatred based on Sephardic Jews being deprived, so to speak, and so on, which happened in the past to some extent, but definitely is not a story today. But he brought up resentments of being supposedly representing the resentments of the grandfathers of people today against the system or taking over of the Ashkenazi, so on and so forth. And there are certain elements that they, in his party, they didn't, said, okay, but time is scarred. Let's change the running of the system by other elements than before. But Netanyahu, after he was accused and the campaign against him was running all the time, actually changed his attitudes and views. And we all believe that he adopted, it's nothing new, having a revolution of its kind by changing the system of a change of the simple majority with no control, with no the court or any other elements to review what the decisions without judicial review and so on. That happened before in Hungary, in Poland, and even more extreme in Turkey. And Turkey is similar to a large extent with what was about probably to develop, even beyond Mr. Netanyahu's beliefs, by the Messianic and the extreme Orthodox, by replacing Muslim law, that the Sharia law that Erdogan is put in Turkey into Israel. So, and And Netanyahu himself, it was a friend, a close person, and we tried to change the system. At the time we worked together, changing system, reducing the pressure of coalition system by having direct election of the prime minister, constitution. He actually changed his view. He was very disappointed. I believe that what happened with him, he felt that he is betrayed, that he gave his life, he contributed so much to the country, and he's chased for nothing, for some presents that he was received and so on. And he changed his view and joined the non-democratic groups within the state of Israel. And by this way, and by signing the coalition agreements and deciding that it should be moved forward immediately after the election, he even prevented a discussion of those major so-called reforms within his own party. It was never discussed, never asked by, of course, not by the supporters of his party, because it wasn't presented that it is a purpose before the election, and even after the election, it was never discussed within his party, and even today not. So what happened was a strange combination of different forces that joined together in order to move Israel into entire different country, at least like Hungary. And I believe it would have led, if it would have happened, the highway would have led from Budapest at least to Ankara.
Israel has a unique and complex task. The fact that we are a Jewish state, by definition, leaves a lot to be open for interpretation. And while we know that religion and state don't often mix well, as history has taught us, we regard church and state, the separation of church and state, as an advancement in human civilization. And we regard religious freedom as a fundamental human right. And as you alluded to, we have these streams and these groups that would like to interpret our Declaration of Independence as legitimizing the erection of a halacha state, right? Of a state where we are governed by Jewish law as interpreted by the rabbinate. What do you think is the solution for understanding how to define ourselves as a Jewish state and as a democratic state?
The only foundation that we have is the Declaration of Independence. And so far as I'm concerned, I see the Declaration of Independence the second most important document in Jewish history. The first is, of course, the Ten Commandments. It was given, it's a moral obligation, and one of the most beautiful creation in human history. We can talk about it, but that was the Ani Ma'amin, it was what the moral and obligations, the moral commitment of the Jewish people on the march, on the walk, on the journey to become a nation, taking this long journey into Israel from Egypt, from slavery into an independent Jewish state. And that morality was the guiding elements, guiding principles according to the Ten Commandments. And the Ten Commandments emphasized, first of all, which was a major revolution at the time in the 14th century BC, that they were against all the worshipping, all kind of stones and woods and all kind of statues and so on and so on and so forth. That was a major revolution in the old days, where the entire world was using it. Instead of it, it was a non-physical kind of abstract Lord that is the heart of which is beaming with the human spirit and human morality. That was the first thing. Second was freedom. In the Ten Commandments it says, "Anochi Adonai Elohecha, asher hotzeaticha me'eretz Mitzrayim." Well, it is everybody. No hotzeti את העם, not hotzeti the people. Hotzeticha, every Jew, is now freed of slavery. The idea of freedom, of individual freedom, is part of Judaism. And then they have morality. There are things that you shouldn't do against all crimes and moral behavior. And then is humanism, which wasn't so much. It was created by the Jews, so to speak, by the very fact that on Saturday, not only you should rest, also your slave, and you, the animal that you are working. Ki eved hayita be'eretz Mitzrayim. You shouldn't forget it. We believe in humanism. We believe in the right of individuals to be free, and having this small commitment for you. And of course, add to it the justice, the rule of moral law that is guiding the Jewish people. That was a command. So it is a declaration that was given and guided the Jewish people on the way to becoming a nation from slavery. Now, what happened? Out of horrible situations of generations in exile, that the Jewish blood was, in every river you could see all over Europe, the Jewish blood flowing. Finally, and of course, the halacha, Jewish law, did one thing. Did, of course, the most important thing by preserving Judaism, to a large extent, by also interpreting national traditions and laws into religious ones, and thereby they were able to create this wonderful creation of a virtual nation, without land, without common language, without anything, different people spreading around, even different races and so on, and upholding the idea of the Jewish people. Now we had the Holocaust, and it's a horrible thing, and we came back to Israel. And all the political parties at that time united and agreed on a declaration. And that declaration emphasized that we are a Jewish nation, and our values are values which are alongside with the most developed ideas of humanism that were expressed a little bit after our recognition by the United Nations, by the covenant of the International Covenant of Human Rights, that was very influenced by Judaism, basically, and we said, okay, it's a Jewish state. The major role of the Jewish state is gathering the exiles, bringing people together. But it is a state that is committed to equality before the law, regardless of nationality, of sex, of religion, of nationality. It's the idea of equality is the ideology of State of Israel. Yes, there is freedom of religion, but at the same time, we are committed to preserve the status quo of the holy places. And we said, okay, we are not doing anything against other ideologies and so. The state has to protect. It's a right of individual to exercise every religion. Of course, it's a Jewish religion and so on, but it's not the control. We are not the Declaration of Independence, by emphasizing what I've just mentioned, clearly says it's not the Jewish law that is going to rule us, to prevail us. Yes, Jewish law will be preserved. And according to the national law that came, in recent years, the holidays of the Jewish holidays are the national holidays of the land. And our symbols, the flag, and so on, and our capital, and so on, all relate to the history of Judaism, and so on. But it's not the halachic state. And it's rightfully not, because the halacha, what was developed in the diaspora was something of difference. It was different than what the kind of religion that was exercised in Israel at the times that the Jews lived in uncontrolled in Israel. It has another mission, which I've just said, to preserve this very strange idea of Jews being spread all over the world and still feeling as unity. But after all, it is an ancient system of law, which takes into consideration the situation of the Middle Ages at best, if not before. And one cannot exercise, in my view, the Jewish law as it was exercised in the diaspora at the time that there was no airplane and no car, no internet and no telephone and no artificial intelligence and nothing else, and there was no state of Israel that should be within the notions of the advanced countries in the world, and so on and so forth. And science went into places that gives explanations that the ancient time people didn't have it. It's entirely new environment and entirely huge undertaking. And here our Declaration of Independence said, okay, this is what we have. And this is our commitments to the most advanced human rights and liberal ideas. And it is Jewish state because we are Jews. But it doesn't mean that we have to exercise this ancient laws of Judaism that were very important to preserve Judaism in the diaspora. That has no meaning to a large extent to the modern environment and developments in the world and the very existence of the Jewish state.
And our common law system that our judicial system is based on is able to adapt and evolve. And I think, as you said, we do need things that fit our modern environment. Uriel, my final question. What is yet to be done? What are the areas now that you think that we need to focus on most in order to ensure an Israel that we will all want to live in?
Right now, we shouldn't speak about kind of unity. It's people, as I've explained, people have different views about what should be done in the country, what should be the value system of the country. The country is split. What we have to emphasize is the fact that we have a commitment to the Jewish state. And there is a place for everybody in the Jewish state. And there should be equality in the Jewish state. And people cannot hold on the attitudes without contributing. They get the freedom, everybody gets the freedom to exercise religion as she or he understands, and his rabbi or her rabbis understand. Her rabbi doesn't exist that much among the ultra-Orthodox, but What we have to safeguard is a democratic system and the protection of individual freedoms and values. So what I would do right now in this moment is to stop the split and what is moving dangerously towards a confrontation. Because it's, to be sure, the at least toughest population, if not more, will not be ready to live under the this coalition total rule and without any judicial review. And so what has to be done is first to solidify the law which protects the human dignity and freedom, basic law, to change it. That will include at least certain elements that are missing, but the most important is equality. And we should pass a system that will give a special standing to basic laws, including, most of all, the basic law of human dignity and freedom, that it couldn't be changed or overrun decisions of the court, making decisions according to that basic law. There shouldn't be changed this law by less than 80 members out of 120 members of the Knesset. That should be done immediately. And thereby, and of course, that the system of selecting judges altogether should be the system that we have today, should stay in touch, and shouldn't be changed, which creates a system, without going into detail, a system of reaching compromises which no one have the upper hand. And thereby, compromises will be made, and thereby a representation of different elements of society will be represented in the court, except those who totally are against democracy. Doing that can leave many other issues still open and up to heated debate between the Orthodox and the Messianic groups and the liberal, which I believe the liberal majority. But okay, that can be discussed. It can be even, very aggressive split of opinions and so on. But the first move out of the day is saying there is no democratic revolution. There is no anti-democratic revolution, so to speak. We guarantee the basic human rights, and we guarantee the power of the court in order to preserve the control, the judicial review of the legislation of the Knesset. If that comes, then it will not solve the problems, but it will create a system that we have a safeguard, an important safeguard to the continuity of the democratic systems, that we are not gliding into Hungary or Ankara or Turkey. If that we reach a decision right now, we say, okay, that's the end of the revolution, the counter against the democracy and against basic rights, human rights, then the system, then we at least are able to say, okay, we are safeguarded democracy. That doesn't mean that we are one. We are in tremendous split of opinions. But okay, that is, here we can fight it through the democratic system and reach compromises. And there will be one Knesset and another Knesset and so on and so forth. But it will not overturn this, and it will enable us to live together. The idea is two things. first understand that it's our destiny and our deep commitment to give a chance to this great story of the Zionist revolution, of this, I wouldn't say miracle, because we bought our independence by sacrificing a lot of Jewish blood and commitment of many who gave their lives to establish the state of Israel and contribute all our knowledge and commitment to the flourishing of our society. We have to stay together, and we have to sort out through the democratic system, but by safeguarding democracy. We have to do it. I think that what happened recently showed us all that we have great differences. That this horrible attempt of denying us the protection of the law and doing away with democracy is alarming. But if what I said will be passed by legislation as soon as possible, we have a chance of seeing how we will move away from extreme religion and populistic approaches, and finds a way, step by step, of being able to build over what we were confronting recently. There is a long way, and we have to recognize that we are not one. We are not. We are one in the case that we should never give up what was bestowed upon us, not by divine power, but with what bestowed upon us by tremendous commitment of so many people, with the love of being identified with the history of the Jewish people, and try to find a cure to the wounds and schisms that we are confronting today. So this one small step that I've mentioned is a way to get out of what we are facing today and put us on understanding of a road that we have to listen to each other and try to accommodate us within the framework of democracy that is based on certain inalienable basic rights, human rights, and citizens' rights, and recognizing also those who are living in Israel who are not Jewish, and they should also benefit from the rule of law.
Uriel, this has been an enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for your time and for this very important message.
Well, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to meet you again. I was very impressed by your speech on graduation, and I'm very happy that you are doing, you're working and enlightening the public with conversations that you are actually initiating.
Thank you, Uriel. It's a real honor.